I know that's harder for you, so my apologies. So again, I am Becky Yota. I am the I am the Environmental Protection Program Manager for the Department of Fish and Wildlife's Marine Region, under which I have the management duties along with my staff for the department of the MPA network. And we are a part of the MPA program. So thanking you guys again for being here. I think right off the bat, we would like to know whether or not you have any questions about the material presented in the presentation for you. We'd like to take some time to do that. If there are any questions about anything that I went through seemingly very quickly. So this is a good time if you have any of those questions. And we also have questions for you that we would like to get feedback on. But before we go to our questions, I'd like to know if anybody has questions. And I'll look to you, Jocelyn, I'm not sure I can see everybody's hands, so I'll look to you to manage that.
Wonderful. I will keep my eyes out for hands raised. That helps us put everyone in a queue so we can make sure we get to folks' questions as hands are raised. I'll also just take a moment to introduce myself, Jocelyn Ennevoldsen, working for Strategic Earth, helping to facilitate this community meeting. I'd love to hand it over to OPC and CVFW to introduce yourselves.
Yeah, sure. Hi everybody.
Go Toba, go.
Thanks. Hi everyone. For those of you who joined after I introduced myself, I'm Toba Handelman, Senior MPA Program Manager at the California Ocean Protection Council.
And I am Sarah Ward, and I'm an environmental scientist with the Department of Fish and Wildlife, working with Becky on the MPA Management Program. Happy to see you all today.
Wonderful. So we'll go ahead and answer general questions for a few moments here, and would love to get us started on the focused questions shortly thereafter. So I'm seeing Benjamin, your hand is raised, and if you can unmute yourself, come on across.
Hi, thanks. Yeah, thanks for your time today. I guess my question is the department, does the department have any process, or is it considering ways to evaluate economic benefits, apart from fisheries benefits, like ecotourism, benefits to the ecotourism and tourism economies? Those would be like direct benefits, like people buy a scuba diving trip, right, to go visit an MPA, but also like the indirect benefits to coastal economies. And I know there are resources out there in our various communities that could probably help provide information as to ecotourism economies and the marine sector. And I think that's an important benefit, right, in terms of recreational benefits that the MPA network provides. So I'm just wondering if the department's considering a process or a way to solicit that information in the review process.
Yeah, thank you, Benjamin. That's a great question. And Sarah, do you want to take that and give Ben a little bit more detail about what we're doing on that?
Sure, that's a great question, Ben. So one of the working groups that, well, actually a few of the working groups that Becky mentioned in the slides, which we of course can provide more information to you afterwards about, and there's provided links in there as well, really started to dig into some of these like economic and human dimensions focused questions. So really, as a part of this review, it's going to be more about fleshing out the priorities on kind of how we tackle that in the future, and just taking what we can get right now. The NCs group, which is working on kind of integrating, will dig into some of those data, but we don't have a lot of economic data that pertains directly to economic effects. So certainly that's going to be an ongoing thing, and we'll be taking a lot of the kind of priorities that these working groups have given to us to the commission and start that conversation, if that kind of helps.
Yeah, I'd like to add on to that a little bit, Ben. It's one. I remember I talked about data gaps. This is one of those data gaps we recognize right off the bat, so that we need to continue to work on that. And there is going to be some human dimensions components to the Decadal Management Review. not drilling in that specific, but there will be some of that. So it's definitely something we recognize that we need to gather more info on that. Hopefully that.
All right, thanks so much. Let's go on now to Deborah. Deborah, if you can unmute yourself, come on across.
Hi, thank you. I just had a question whether there's any effort towards evaluating the effect of sand replenishment programs on tide pool areas. Tide pools are important. I think they kind of, they're definitely being affected, at least my local ones that are by my house. And it's really I mean, it's a way a lot of us become interested in the ocean. It's the only place where if you don't have a boat, or you don't snorkel or dive, it's really the only place you can see, critters and become interested in them. So that's my question. And I've had trouble getting more information from Fish and Wildlife. I understand they're very busy, but it's been like 4.5 months now that I've requested some information and have not gotten anything yet. So
yes, thanks, Deborah. That's totally my fault. So this is a perfect time for us to talk about it. Sand movement is an interesting problem in California with regards, especially on the South Coast, with regards to the need for beach replenishment in some areas of the South Coast. There is just the natural oceanographic processes that occur, whether it's storms or just the natural currents that move sediments around, including sand, are responsible, and in some cases anthropogenic structures, whether it's piers or jetties, that tend to shift those sands around that wouldn't normally do that. It's not something that the Marine Life Protection Act covered, but there is a coastal sediment management work group, which is an interagency state and federal work group that has worked on sediment management throughout the state of California for quite a while. And that work group works on how to best manage sediment, basically sand and other sediments, to really try to minimize impacts, but also provide that resource where it's needed in areas where beaches need to be replenished. So while the Marine Life Protection Act doesn't cover that, it is being covered under this separate process with regards to those changes in sediment. So what we did do in the Marine Life Protection Act process.
Sorry, Becky, I would love to, we have one more hand here and we're supposed to move on quickly, and I don't mean to interrupt, but I would just love to pause us there and say it's a separate process, and maybe the two of you can catch up, circle back after this.
There's just one sentence I want to say.
Okay, go.
That in the MPA process, MLPA process in the South Coast, there was recognition of the need for beach replenishment. And so there are MPAs that allow that. So yes, we can take it off point, but I do want to say that that was a part of the process in the South Coast.
Wonderful, and certainly did not mean to cut you off there. Want to be responsive here to Tim. Tim, your question will be the last question for general, and then we want to make sure that this is an opportunity for us to gather all of the responses to these other questions. So Tim, take it away.
Thank you. My question is, where can I find a summary of fish counts, algae counts, and vertebrate counts in marine protected areas over the life of the MPAs? Would you be able to post a link to that information in a summary form? The data?
Sarah, you want to answer that for him?
Sure, I can take that. So we are in the throes of getting all of the results in from the long-term monitoring from the researchers who are conducting those exact counts up and down the coast in the different habitats. So we're figuring out when that type of thing is going to be publicly available, but a good portion of the report will summarize much of that will go to the commission. And then Tim, we can touch base off the line too. And we'll be posting some more information, hopefully later this week, that summarizes all of the monitoring groups. And there will be links on how to access those data in the form that they're in right now. So we can get that for you.
Yeah, that'd be great. I have, people have responded to my request in the past, and a lot of it's just raw data. It's not summarized. So for me, not being familiar with the process here, it's very difficult to have an understanding. So yeah, I'd appreciate a link to the summaries of it when it becomes available.
Okay, that's great. Thanks for that question.
Wonderful. Okay, so if you have any other general questions, we encourage you to go ahead and send them via the email address that has been sent in the chat. And so at this point, what we'll do is we'll move into our community discussion on the 4 questions that were circulated in advance of this meeting. And what we'll start out with here is, what role would you like your community to play in the MPA management program moving forward? So as you all start to consider that, or maybe continue to consider it, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen in an effort to be transparent. I'll be taking notes. You can see my typos and all of those things, and that'll be showing up on your screen. We'll make sure you can see it all. So what role would you like your community to play in the MPA management program moving forward? And here I'll start sharing. And I think I'm seeing Tim's hand up again. And I'll have you unmute yourself.
Sorry, I had not taken my hand down.
So. All right, so folks should be seeing my screen now, and I'm seeing a hand raised. Is this Rodrigo? Go ahead, come on across. And so maybe I'll ask my co-facilitators here. I actually can't see the names up, so I would love for maybe Sarah or Tova, if you can go ahead and invite folks in the order their hands are raised to come across.
I can do my best. I don't see how to see the order that they come up, so my apologies, but I will scroll through. And the first hand I see is from Carlos.
Ah, thank you.
Yes, this is a quick clarifying question. I had a conflict and so I'm joining in a bit late. Is this the first question that we're all answering together, or is this already the second or third question, just for my own clarity?
This is the first question, so you're right on time.
Thank you very much.
And then Mike, yep, I see your hand. You might be on mute.
Yes, thank you. In terms of Laguna Blue Belt Coalition and City of Laguna, I think we want to be front and center on the management issue. We have a marine protected officer funded by the city. The city has also recently funded a berm monitoring program for the estuary interface with the ocean. We have a tide pool dosing program that's funded by the city. We have events, Kelp festivals, photo contests, etc., to raise awareness and consciousness. So Laguna Beach has invested a lot of time and money in management of the MPAs, and we'd like to go forward in that key position. The Laguna Blue Belt Coalition is a nonprofit that's dedicated to education, protection, water quality improvements, restoration, and networking. And to the question, maybe digress, will they be looking at water quality? Because it's difficult to have a healthy MPA if we're not looking at water quality. So thanks for letting me comment.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And just to get clarification in terms of, and also thanks for all the great work that you guys do locally, just to get clarification from you, in terms of you guys being forefront and really, you know, expressing the work that you've been doing, is there a way for us to improve our communications, or are our communications good and we should just keep moving forward? That's my question for you.
Well, actually, we've run into interagency problems around discharge of urban runoffs into the SMCAs. Coastal Commission says it's the Regional Water Quality Control Board. They say it's Fish and Wildlife. So it's kind of a circle, and you know, these impacts are significant. Liso Creek alone discharges 2.5 million gallons of urban runoff every time the berm is breached, and that goes directly into the SMCA. So we're very concerned about ocean water quality. The recent oil spill has reminded everyone of the unseen impacts to sea life. We incidentally have routine swim surveys to actually do field verification, and I think that would be an area that I would encourage, is more field verifications.
Okay, great.
That help, Sarah?
Yeah, that actually helps a lot.
Yeah, and I'm sorry, Sarah, this is—
Go ahead, Becky.
Yeah, it does help a lot, Mike, and this is also an issue that we can take to the statewide, MPA statewide leadership team, which is an interagency group of both state and federal agencies that like the Water Board and State Lands Commission and the Coastal Commission, state parks, National Marine Sanctuaries, Corps of Engineers, and the list goes on, of agencies that have some overlapping jurisdictions within the MPAs, but not direct management of the MPAs. And this is exactly the kind of thing that we can take to the leadership team to help us figure out the best way to move forward on that, and to continue help you guys with your good work. So that's helpful.
Thank you, Becky, and please feel free to contact us for any local assistance on that. And then the last point, I just did a swim survey of the kelp forest. They're rebounding very nicely right now, significantly in Laguna. So obviously kelp is a very significant part of all this, and the recent legislation to allow for reforestation in SMCAs should move forward. And then finally, we're still suffering from sargassum invasions as well. So that's
yes, not to mention Caulerpa prolifera. Yes.
Okay, so I'm hearing that restoration and invasive species are on your top list of priorities for us to consider. Thank you for that, Mike. And just in the instance of time, I think Benjamin, you're up next. At least you're at the top of my list.
Hi, thanks again. Yeah, Mike was a helpful prompt, I think, for me. So thanks, Mike. I should mention my affiliation. I'm representing Santa Barbara Channel Keeper, and Channel Keeper's been supporting implementation for many years through primarily education, outreach, and monitoring through our MPA Watch program. And I suppose if in this format, you know, the department's looking for, you know, verification that, you know, community partners are continue to remain invested in, you know, those types of efforts, you know, certainly, you know, Channel Keeper remains invested in this type of work, and as are, I imagine, most of the groups, you know, represented by individuals in this meeting. So yes, we continue to remain invested in implementation as MPA process moves forward, for sure.
Great. Thank you, Benjamin. Barbara from Malibu Divers.
Hi. Yes, I represent Malibu Divers as the owner, and I'm also an LA County Sheriff Reserve diver and also a member of Reef Check. And so I have a lot of firsthand knowledge about reefs off of Malibu, as well as MPAs there and the Channel Islands, as well as a lot of harbors. And I just wanted to say our role to date has been to organize beach and underwater cleanups and to hand out maps, give people directions. We're going to continue to train divers, both free divers and scuba divers, about what the MPAs are, why they matter, et cetera. And We oftentimes see a lot of poaching in MPA areas. And so we end up becoming like citizen law enforcement, posting people's pictures or calling them up and saying, hey, you can't do that. And it's a problem. There's a lack of enforcement, huge lack of enforcement. And yet there's more and more people in the water right now because of COVID. I think there's a lot of pressure on the reefs, both because there is more usage, and then there's a lack of enforcement around the rules, not only in the MPAs, but outside MPAs as well. So I think we have a lot of problems, and I can tell you from my experience that there's a lot less fish. We're seeing less fish, less marine life, more sargassum, all of the above, right? And even seeing deeper fish coming in shallow and more tropical like fish, invasive species. And I think we need more. We need more resources. And, you know, if we need to rally more community resources to do that, you know, that could be a problem. So I'm wondering about, for me, the big question is even if things were to change and there was an expansion, are we going to have the financial as well as personnel resources to make a difference?
Well, thank you for those comments and questions, Barbara. Just to get clarifying, so I hear the issue with enforcement and capacity. Is there kind of, and that really it is kind of a financial thing, even to get our stakeholders like you involved in being out there on the water and giving the observations. Are you finding that you're kind of missing outreach resources from us or anything like that to help with that effort? And then we can address the question about the actual potential available resources.
I think that you guys are great. It's probably just more of the above. You know, okay. We could always use more pamphlets, more maps, better signage. They're really, you know, asking people to use GPS or points of, you know, figuring out where the boundaries are, I think is a long shot. Most people are not going to be able to figure that out.
Okay. Becky or Tova, do you have anything to add to address Barbara's question?
Yeah, maybe not to address the question, but it kind of piles on, Barbara, what you just said about, and Sarah's question. I think that it's been difficult for all of us, for ourselves and our partners, to figure out the best way to communicate information about the MPAs in a way that resonates with folks. And so collectively working together to think about, okay, if signage is not working, if it's going to be more signs, how many more signs do we really need? Where should they really go? Is that really going to work? You know, those kinds of questions. Or is there some other way for us to get the information out there? You know, so that would be good to know how you guys are thinking along those lines. And it's always a challenge with the state we have so big, especially in Southern California, where we have the biggest population areas of the state in Southern California. How do we do that? And so definitely it resonates what you're saying for sure, that need to work on that and the best way forward to do that. So really appreciate all your effort and your help.
And I'll just add here that actually on the point of signage, so up to now, over 400 signs have been installed across the state, with a large percentage of them going in the South Coast actually. And the Ocean Protection Council just at our last council meeting, which happened in September, we just approved additional funding for another 100 signs to be installed. And that evaluation of signage that Becky just talked about is exactly going to be done over the next 2 years by the California Marine Sanctuary Foundation and the MPA Collaborative Network. So I would highly recommend that you, Barbara, or anybody else who are on this call today, to check out the MPA Collaborative Network as an opportunity to provide some feedback on the signs and on other local concerns that you're seeing in your areas. There's different chapters for the MPA Collaborative Network, different collaboratives based on the counties. So that is actually something that is going to be addressed over the next 2 years. So we're looking forward to that.
Thanks for that, Tova. And thank you, Barbara. We've got all that captured. So just really quickly, I think I see Donna and Carlos's hand up, and then we've got 3 other questions to get to. So maybe after Donna and Carlos have a chance to weigh in, we can move on to the next question, if that's okay with everybody. Great, silence is golden. Donna, go for it.
Hi, everyone, thank you. Someone had brought up the tourism impact of the MPAs, and I just want to remind everyone that Dana Point was named a Whale Heritage Site last year, and one of the criteria was talking about the marine conservation areas. So I just want to bring that up, that it's very important that Dana Point was named a Whale Heritage Site by the World Cetacean Alliance, and so that is something that we can point to. And I would just say that Dana Point has a very large tide pool area, and those maps are very important to all of us. As far as like us on the whale watching boats, we hand out all the information that is given to us. So when I get those maps and little displays, we definitely put them up. So I just want to give a kudos to giving us the information, but I just really wanted to point out the Whale Heritage Site because we did use the MLPA in the application. So I just want to share that.
Thank you, Donna. That's great. And kind of just trying to circle back to the original question in terms of what role like the whale watching community could potentially play in our management program. So it sounds like you guys are doing a great job at passing out all of the outreach materials that get to you. So thanks for that. But is there anything else, just being out on the water, that you think that community in particular could help us with, especially given the recognition? You know, I actually hadn't heard about that. So that's fantastic. So to me, it sounds like we need to start kind of trying to, I mean, we can't track everything, but try to improve these recognitions that call out the MPAs and things. So do you see that as a place potentially for improvement on our end?
Sure. Yes. I mean, we did. It just, when someone asked about that, it just reminded me that perhaps when the press release and the communication was sent out, it wasn't maybe communicated to you guys, and so that you could add that to a finding or something that's going on that's positive. So we could do a better job about doing that. I always follow up with Dana Point, of course, but we need to get the larger message out. So it's something that you should be aware of.
Great. Thank you, Donna. And then Carlos. Oh, Giselle, were you going to?
Yeah, I was just going to echo what Donna said.
So I'm thinking.
Right. We're over at Captain Dave's. That the one thing I would add is that, you know, Dana Point is the first Whale Heritage Site in the Americas. And when we were going through this very rigorous application process, one of the things that we could point to was this kind of function that our community is, you know, operating with, and how we're doing these great conservation measures. So we appreciated what you let us bring to the table in terms of our worthiness as a location. And it certainly resounded with them. They were really excited about that. And I think any materials that you can give us that can help us raise the awareness when people are on the boat, you know, between the two companies, we bring out probably about 100,000 people.
Oh, wow.
And
that's
so, you know, we can really get the awareness out there if we're given the materials. So.
Okay, that's great to know. Thank you. Carlos, you're up next, and then we'll move on to the next question.
To reinforce the point on outreach, I wanted to reiterate the importance of making sure that any materials, whether that be pamphlets or whether that be the signage, is accessible language-wise to communities that, for example, are predominantly non-English speakers. Tova, I want to keep in mind your comment on providing feedback to the MPA Collaborative Network on this kind of information, and I will relay that information, but I wanted to make that quick point in case several communities are going into certain areas and maybe they don't have that information accessible to them. But I think that there's a lot more other questions that I want to focus more of my attention and time on, but that's all for now.
Great, thank you, Carlos.
That's a great point, Carlos, and that's absolutely something that is included in this upcoming effort. So I'm happy to talk with you more about that offline.
Yeah, and I would just pile onto that the department recognized that as well as with our partnership with Ocean Protection Council and our other collaborative partners. So trying to figure out the best way to do that and for reaching all those folks is what we're committed to doing. So I appreciate bringing that up. Go ahead, Sarah.
I was just going to move on to the next question. So I think Jocelyn's bringing that up, and while she gets it in there, I do just want to stress, I know we don't have a lot of time on the phone today, but this is not the last time that all of you will have the chance to engage with us. And we'll have, Becky's given the information, and we'll have more information on how to kind of stay engaged as this process works. So if you don't get your voice heard today, just know that there will be many opportunities to put in your 2 cents or $1 or $1 million. Okay, so the next question, what are your highest priority topics or issues and sources of information that should be considered as a part of the Decadal Management Review? And I've heard some already come up from the group, but go ahead and raise your hand if you have any thoughts. And Carlos, I don't know if your hand is still up.
Yes, it's still up. I wanted to transition into this one. I think it's a good way to go.
Okay, great. Yeah, you're at the top of the list, so go ahead.
Perfect, thank you. And so I hadn't had a chance to briefly introduce myself to the rest of this group, but my name is Carlos and I work with Azul. We are an environmental justice organization working specifically with communities of color, for example, like the Latino community, to increase access to the coast and ocean areas. And as a part of that, the MPAs are a significant part of our work. And one piece of information that I want to bring attention to this particular conversation is Governor Newsom's executive order on 30 by 30 and increasing accessible increasing equitable access to communities of color as a part of that initiative. And so in terms of our organization's priorities as the Decadal Review is happening, is to make sure that MPAs that are currently in existence and any ones that might be expanded, that there is still a significant, strong emphasis on making sure that those areas are accessible to communities of color, whether they are near or near the coast or even inland. And that is the biggest priority for us. Understanding that there are certain situations where an increase of people going to these areas and especially in the last year and a half with COVID, we do not believe that decreasing the usage of these areas is necessarily the right way to go. And in fact, the other way to go about it is to make sure that people who are going to these areas are encouraged to keep going to them, but more importantly, that there is a specific emphasis on those people who typically have not had access to those areas historically. So that is something that we want to keep in mind. And although I am in line with whatever's happening on the state level in California in regards to 30 by 30 and its MPAs, I'm also heavily working on issues at the federal level with MPAs. And so those things are hand in hand for us. And so we want to make sure that those processes are aligned at the state and the federal level, because I know that the Biden administration is paying close attention to what happens in California, and that sets a precedent for federal MPAs off the California coast. And so we want to make sure those comments are taken into consideration.
Thank you, Carlos. And I think I hear Becky in the background.
You do hear me going. Thank you, Sarah. And thank you, Carlos. Those are all really critically important comments. And I wanted to just comment a little bit on the federal MPAs. We do have federal MPAs off of California and off the Northern Channel Islands, state MPAs. And in addition to that, The Ocean Protection Council, as well as ourselves, are very much tied into the federal MPA NOAA process, NOAA MPA Center. So we're in contact with them on a regular basis. We're plugged into that process. So it's already connected, and we've been connected for a while. We've had representatives from California be on the MPA working group for that MPA Center, which is really important. I think I just had one question, and I think I know the answer, so pardon me if I'm, but when you're talking about access, there's a number of ways of looking at access, right? So there's access, meaning the ability to get to these MPAs, and there is all, and the other access is just being able to educate everyone about the MPAs. And then there's being able to just walk and do things within the MPAs. So, you know, public access is really not something that the MLPA addressed, because it's under the Coastal Commission to make sure that access to these sites are provided, and that the MLPA did not change that. So as far as getting to them, you know, once you're there, as far as being able to participate or do something within the MPAs, as long as it's within the regulations, is always going to be there. So I think what you were talking about, I think, and I just want to verify that helps us, you know, improve and work towards this, is better education for those communities you're talking about, Carlos, with respect that they even exist and what they're about. And then how, and you mentioned Governor Newsom's 30 by 30 and just, you know, environmental justice in general, how best to help bring those communities actually to these sites. So I just want to make sure that I'm hearing what you're saying correctly, so that we can capture that and move forward with it. Did I get it right?
So that, first of all, you're absolutely right. There's different components of access, and in order to, one, not take up all the oxygen in the room and not let other people have an opportunity to speak. Obviously, access within the realm of the MLPA process and what that can cover is something that I definitely want the process to focus on. And if there are areas of the process that they are not able to take on because it's outside of their jurisdiction, that's totally understandable, and I'm aware of those constraints. But still, I wanted to make sure that those topics are top of mind as someone who is here as a part of the process, to make sure that someone is making sure that that's clear and is in the notes and in the minutes, and I'm just, you know, making sure that that's communicated to you and to anyone else who's also part of this process.
Okay, thank you, Carlos. Thanks.
Yes, thank you, Carlos. Oh,
absolutely, echoing all the gratitude.
Jocelyn, okay. I was like, I don't see who's talking.
It's Jocelyn, and I'm going to go ahead and in an effort to make sure that we're getting as many different voices as possible, I'm going to go ahead and have Michael Bloom come across as the next speaker. Okay, so Michael, come on across.
Well, hello and good afternoon. Thank you for giving me the chance to speak. I represent Sea of Clouds. We are a nonprofit focusing on coastal cultural resources. So I think my comments are going to build on top of Carlos's excellent points about access, and to express a priority and an interest that we have in maritime heritage conservation. That is to say that resources that can exist within MPAs, but may represent different kinds of conservation opportunities, separate and distinct from a singular focus on protecting species and habitat. The project that led to the expansion of the MPA network and the two pieces of enabling legislation that provided the opportunity for the network to be expanded in the way that it did over the last 10 years, always intended for this kind of dual match between natural and cultural heritage. Unfortunately, so far what we have expressed is a singular focus on protecting species and habitat. We don't really do that in terrestrial parks, which are designated to reflect multiple conservation values. You know, we protect natural resources there, of course, but we also protect archaeological, historical, and cultural resources as well. We also do that to some degree in marine parks. You know, the proposed, for example, the proposed Chumash National Marine Sanctuary here in California will recognize the deep connections the Chumash have in addition to explicit natural resource protections. That's kind of the direction that our comments are steered toward. And if this isn't an opportunity within the decadal, you know, within the immediate term, we would at least like recognition that this is a gap that could be further evaluated and discussed for future adaptive management cycles.
That's a great comment, Michael. Thank you for that. And I know Becky mentioned this earlier, and it was a part of the presentation. This idea of gaps in knowledge and kind of things where we need to improve is going to be a huge part of the review. And a lot of the human dimension stuff is going to be kind of linked all up in that. And I almost don't like calling it gaps in knowledge, because it's not that the knowledge isn't out there from all of our stakeholders and partners and the California Native American tribes. It's just that what we're hearing is that, you know, we need to be better and aware of linking it and incorporating it. So it's a fantastic comment. Thank you. And Becky and Tova, I don't know if you have anything to add to that.
No, again, appreciate the comment, and yeah, lots of improvement, you know, needed, and as Sarah said, in linking things together like this. So that's definitely a part of it.
Great. So this is Jocelyn coming across here. I'm seeing Benjamin's hand is raised for this question, and let's take this and then move on to the next question. Benjamin, come on across.
Thanks, and I'll probably, you know, sit out most of the rest to give other people an opportunity. And there's no need to respond to this either. I just wanted to, I'm right behind Michael's last comment. I think you spoke to, I think I sense that the answer will be similar to the discussion about tourism economic benefits, but you know, I think it's the fourth goal outlined in the Marine Life Protection Act, right, which is to protect marine natural heritage. And it's something that's easy to give lip service to, right? But that phrase actually, I mean, it carries great meaning, and it's there for a reason. I'm personally someone that this goal resonates with, having grown up, you know, spending most of my childhood away from the ocean, largely growing up in the desert, you know, now in the second half of my life, right? It's part of the reason I'm here today. The ocean carries great meaning, but, you know, there are thousands, if not millions of others today living in the state of California that can't be here today or throughout this process, that care deeply about our marine habitats and that support protection of our marine ecosystems for their intrinsic value. And those people matter too, as well as the future generations, right, that the MLPA was drafted to serve. And that intrinsic value, it is critical. You know, and it's similar to climate resilience, maybe, in that it's less tangible than, you know, counting fish or counting dollars. But these things really do matter. And I hope that the department will really spend some real time thinking about ways, I think, like Michael said, to memorialize those intrinsic values, you know, in this review process. Certainly, if changes were made through adaptive management to reduce protections, I would want to first know that, you know, has the opinion of the people in the state of California changed? Or, you know, is our marine heritage equally protected in some other fashion, you know, through those reductions? Those are really important questions. So
yeah, this is great, Benjamin. Thank you. And if you haven't had a chance, I would just point you, because, you know, as I mentioned, this is going to be ongoing engagement throughout this whole process. I think I mentioned earlier our Decadal Evaluation Working Group report. There's an appendices in there. One of the co-leads of that report was a human dimensions expert that we brought in, and she did an amazing job really fleshing out some of those kind of priority questions that we need to be considering. So there's links to that report and all the resources that we're giving out, but there's some great tables in there. And, you know, if we have a chance to engage, you know, in the future, getting a pulse on if we got it captured and that table kind of is at least a good start would be wonderful. So if you haven't had a chance, I would point you in the direction of that report. Okay, Jocelyn, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, not sorry. No apologies needed here. Let's go ahead and move on to the next question, which is how would you define, measure, and or assess progress toward Marine Life Protection Act goals? Go ahead, give folks a few moments to consider.
It's a hefty question, we know.
It is. How do we define, measure, and or assess?
Oh, I think
progress?
I see Mike's physical hand up there.
Thank you.
As I'm scrolling through. Yeah, go ahead, Mike.
I don't know why I can't find my button, sorry. Well, certainly kelp density for essential fish habitat. How large are our kelp forests? What are the threats to the kelp forests? What can we do to restore areas that have been damaged? I think is really an important measure for the success of the MLPA.
And for you, seeing, you know, when you say, I see like how big the kelp forests are, how can we measure their health? Like when you say that to you, really what is truly a healthy habitat, kelp forest habitat, and some other metrics that we really need to hone in on for that.
Right, and there are regular meetings for kelp forest density. And I think tracking that closely will help us understand the best fish habitats out there.
Okay.
Sea life.
So density is at the top. Anybody else? The after lunch nap time is settling in.
It is a hefty question that takes a little bit of effort to think about for sure. And while we're waiting for people to raise hands, it's also a really important one as we're trying to move forward in the best way to continue to manage this network and increase what we're doing in the management program or including more things in the management program of how we need to move forward. And it's going to be important really for the Fish and Game Commission to know these kinds of things as well. So it's something you can still think about, ruminate over. There's still time to provide that feedback. Once we're done with the breakout groups, we'll go over again a couple of options for where you can provide some more answers to the questions that we're giving you guys today, or any other thoughts that you might have. We'll put those sites up for you to take advantage of. But yeah, it's a tough one for us too. So we know how difficult that question is.
You know, if I could expand for a minute on the kelp issue, we had sargassum invasion last summer, pretty severe. Yeah. And we were looking for an opportunity to remove it in these SMCA areas, which originally were set aside for research and restoration. And we were denied that because everyone was waiting for their 10-year review. But it would be nice to have steps available or protocols where when we see invasive species wiping out the kelp forest in this case, that we can move with Department of Fish and Wildlife and come in and responsibly remediate.
Yes, I appreciate that comment, Mike. And it was real more of the methodology in terms of the best way to remove sargassum. As you know, it's tricky, you know, without making it worse. And looking at how we're going to do that, I think the real key to that, or any other invasive species. I mentioned
It's good. It takes my black being in there.
Can everybody make sure they're on mute really quickly? Sorry, Becky.
That's okay.
By the way, the sea urchins have been really removed in the MPA areas that we've been searching. So that's a good sign that the sheephead are robust in doing their job.
Right.
That's great. Great, thanks, Mike. Let's go on to Tim here, and we have about 5 more minutes. So want to be thoughtful if other folks have last thoughts here for this moment to share. Of course, opportunities continue beyond this webinar. Tim, please.
Sure. So on how you would define and measure the progress, my question would be, so there's 6 goals, as I understand it, of the MLPA Act. And do you have any information on specific performance thus far on the 6 goals?
That is going to be what the 2022 review is all about, Tim. So okay. The information is coming in. As I mentioned, a lot of the research and monitoring information is just coming in, and we are really digging deep into kind of how we're going to link that all up. And this is why we're posing this question to you guys, to hear what you all consider progress and not necessarily even success, but progress towards meeting the goals. So, you know, the heart of the 2022 review is going to be this exact thing.
Yeah, I love that question, Tim, because it does hit right to the heart of it.
Yep.
And that's what we're trying to get to.
So I have a question that came through the chat. The question is, how do other CDFW programs evaluate the successes of their endeavors?
That's a great question.
Could you, I'm sorry, could you repeat it again, Toby? I know we don't have much time, but how do other programs?
How do other CDFW programs evaluate the success of their endeavors?
Huh. It depends on the type of, well, I'm going to focus it on marine region because that's my life. But it goes towards other parts of the department. But many other programs within the marine region are fisheries management related programs, and so there are a lot of ways to evaluate success with regards to, you know, whether it's stock assessments for species or, you know, landings type data or regulatory management, or there's lots of different variables that go into measuring that success. It's very different. That's very different than what we're dealing with within the Habitat Conservation Program, where MPAs and the network is housed. It's a little bit different. It's a component of it, for sure. The fisheries management piece, habitat, ecosystem function, and integrity aspects. So it's a little bit different, but there are definitely a variety of measures that other programs use, but they're just very different.
And that's a great question. I just think it highlights that for the MPA program, it truly is, we're really building the blueprint on how to do this. So of course, we're taking lessons learned from our other programs, but it's so different because it's ecosystem based and not species specific based and just all that good stuff. So we've got about 2 minutes left. We get whisked away pretty quickly when the breakout sessions end. So I just, before last thoughts, I just would really want to thank everybody for being here and giving us your input. And I see Barbara and Giselle have their hands up. Is it for the next question, Barbara? Because I think we're going to move on to that. Last words.
Okay, so because I collect data underwater and do surveys for marine life, you know it when you see it, when it's working, and when it works, it's great. But because there's a lack of enforcement, in fact, there's a lot of hostility from other use groups, particularly fishermen, that are fishing in these MPAs. They know where the big fish are. It's skewing the data. So without better enforcement, the data is not going to support that MPAs work. We're seeing more fish outside the MPAs in some cases because the MPAs are getting fished out. So we need to fix enforcement before we do anything.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm hearing progress towards goals is really working on enforcement capacity. Thank you for that, Barbara. And then Becky, were you going to say something?
Nope, I was just going to thank her for the same thing. Go ahead.
Okay. And Giselle, you're our last hand up today.
I was just going to suggest maybe we could consider, since whale entanglement is an issue that we know can be tied to gear and, you know, pots and things like that, we could perhaps consider using the frequency of entanglements as a measuring device.
Interesting idea.
Yeah, thank you for that. Okay, we've got 3 minutes or 3 seconds left. Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Or maybe we don't. Maybe they've ended pretty quickly in the last meetings.
Yeah, there we go.
Okay, everyone will be swept away in about 50 seconds. I'm going to go ahead and stop my screen share. Now what is happening?
I'm not touching anything, Jocelyn. I'm not doing anything.
Are you still seeing my screen?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Oh, you are. Okay, stop share. There we go. We get to wave goodbye to each other. See you back in the main room here. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
And I think just a friendly reminder to no one that is left. Nope, Barbara and Mike are here. Remember that you can submit additional thoughts via that email address that's been shared.
And we'll share it again soon.
Great.